Angelina Jolie's six children. Angelina Jolie's six children have grown up amid one of the most closely examined family breakups in modern Hollywood. Their childhood unfolded under constant attention, shaped by headlines, legal disputes, and public speculation surrounding their parents' separation. Yet, as they mature, their lives have taken directions that few anticipated. Rather than remaining defined by the Brad Pitt Angelina Jolie narrative, each child appears to be forging an identity marked by independence, restraint, and personal ambition. Maddox Jolie Pitt was the first to challenge Angelina Jolie's life. Adopted from Cambodia as an infant, he came into her entry point into motherhood and responsibility long before her family became a global fascination. Jolie raised him largely on her own in the early years, balancing an intense film career with single parenthood. When Brad Pitt later emerged in their lives, he formally adopted Maddox, but the bond between mother and son had already been forged in relative solitude. Maddox grew up observing film sets and creative environments, eventually working behind the scenes on projects his mother directed. As he reached adulthood, he chose an academic path far removed from Hollywood, enrolling in universities overseas and stepping into independence with quiet determination. His public comments about his father have been brief and measured, reflecting emotional distance rather than open conflict. Pax Jolie Pitt's journey began in Vietnam, where he spent his early childhood before being adopted by Jolie. His integration into the family expanded its multicultural identity. Though briefly exposed to entertainment through voice work and behind-the-scenes roles, Pax gravitated toward visual arts and photography. Reports of him working under a pseudonym underscored a recurring theme among Jolie's children, a desire to create without being consumed by inherited fame. Even moments of public concern, such as a serious accident, served as reminders that celebrity children remain vulnerable in ordinary ways. Zahara Jolie Pitt emerged as a figure of compassion and intellect. Adopted from Ethiopia, she grew up deeply connected to her mother's humanitarian work. While she briefly explored acting, her long-term interests leaned toward activism, education, and creative philanthropy. Her decision to attend a historically black women's college signaled a deliberate choice to define herself beyond celebrity lineage. Public attention intensified when she chose to use her mother's surname, a move widely interpreted as symbolic, though never publicly explained. Shiloh Jolie Pitt, the first biological child of Jolie and Brad Pitt, became a focal point of global attention from birth. Over time, she stood out for her commitment to self-expression and refusal to conform to traditional expectations. Supported openly by her mother, Shiloh explored identity through fashion, movement, and art. Dance became her primary outlet, revealing discipline and talent without the trappings of celebrity performance. Her legal decision to change her name in adulthood further emphasized a desire for autonomy rather than explanation. Knox and Vivian Jolie Pitt, the twins, experienced fame from their first moments. Yet, among all the siblings, Knox has remained the most private, rarely seen and largely uninterpreted by the public. Vivian briefly appeared on screen as a child, then retreated, later resurfacing quietly as a behind-the-scenes assistant in theater production. Their lives suggest careful guidance, away from overexposure and towards exploration on their own terms. Collectively, Jolie's children represent an uncommon outcome in celebrity culture. Rather than capitalizing on visibility, they appear to be limiting it. Their paths, academic, artistic, humanitarian, and private, challenge assumptions about fame as inheritance. In doing so, they offer a rare example of what life after spectacle can look like: intentional, guarded, and self-directed. Angelina Jolie's children in 2026, choosing privacy in a world that demands visibility. By 2026, the conversation surrounding Angelina Jolie's children has shifted in a quiet but meaningful way. Not because of scandal, not because of public statements, but because of absence. In a culture where visibility is often treated as obligation, Their continued retreat from public life has become the most defining feature of their upbringing. Maddox, Pax, Zahara, Shiloh, Knox, and Vivian are no longer children living in the shadow of celebrity. They are young adults and adolescents navigating identity at an age when most public figures begin to monetize attention. And yet, they have largely declined to do so. This choice stands in contrast to nearly every prevailing trend of the digital era. Rather than cultivating personal brands, Jolie's children have maintained minimal public footprints. Social media accounts, if they exist at all, remain private. Public appearances are rare and carefully contextualized, often tied to education, humanitarian events, or family obligations rather than self-promotion. Interviews are non-existent. This silence has often been misinterpreted. Some view it as overprotection. Others see it as rebellion against fame. But in reality, it appears to be something more deliberate, an intentional separation between identity and exposure. By 2026, privacy has become a form of resistance. The years following Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's separation fundamentally reshaped how the children were raised. Where once they were photographed constantly, they are now largely unseen. Where their names once fueled speculation, they now invite restraint. This was not achieved through confrontation or explanation, but through consistency. The family did not negotiate with public curiosity. It simply outlasted it. What is most striking is not what we know about Jolie's children, but what we do not. There are no viral moments marking their transitions into adulthood. No curated narratives of reinvention. No public attempts to correct misconceptions. Their lives unfold beyond the audience's reach, resisting the cultural pressure to be understood, categorized, or consumed. In doing so, they challenge a deeply embedded assumption that the children of famous parents owe something to the public. They do not. Angelina Jolie's parenting, particularly in the post-divorce years, reflects a refusal to treat childhood as content. Her children were not positioned as extensions of her legacy, nor as symbols of a broken Hollywood marriage. They were allowed to remain unresolved. In 2026, this restraint feels increasingly rare and increasingly necessary, because in a world that profits from exposure, the choice to remain private is no longer passive, it is principled. And perhaps that is the quiet truth behind the story of Angelina Jolie's children. Not that they escaped fame, but that they were never taught to need it. Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt in court, when a private separation became a public record. The legal battle between Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt was never just a divorce. It became a prolonged confrontation, conducted under the scrutiny of courts, media, and public opinion, each operating by different rules but feeding the same narrative appetite. At its core, the case revolved around issues that are tragically common: custody, property, and the aftermath of a relationship that could not be repaired. What made it extraordinary was not the substance of the dispute, but its scale. Two of the most recognizable figures in the world were forced to resolve deeply personal matters through institutions designed for procedure, not privacy. Court filings replaced interviews. Legal language replaced emotional clarity. Over time, the proceedings expanded beyond the original separation. Custody arrangements for their children became central, turning parental decisions into legal arguments. Allegations, counterclaims, and sealed documents shaped public perception despite the absence of full context. Each legal move generated headlines, often stripped of nuance and presented as moral verdicts rather than procedural steps. The courtroom does not determine truth in the emotional sense. It determines compliance, burden of proof, and jurisdiction. Yet, the public often treated court outcomes as definitive judgments of character. This misalignment mattered. As the case extended across years and jurisdictions, it revealed a deeper intention between family law and celebrity culture. Legal systems prioritize documentation and precedent. Media ecosystems prioritize narrative and immediacy. When the two collide, complexity is flattened. For Jolie, The court process became intertwined with questions of protection and autonomy, particularly regarding the children. For Pitt, it intersected with reputation, professional continuity, and legal defense. Neither position translated cleanly into public understanding because the courtroom does not explain itself. It only records. Perhaps the most lasting consequence of the Jolie-Pitt court battles is not the rulings themselves, but what they demonstrated. That even extraordinary wealth and influence cannot insulate families from the limits of legal resolution. Courts can divide assets. They can assign custody. They can issue orders. They cannot restore trust. They cannot resolve emotional injury. They cannot provide narrative closure. In the end, the legal process did what it was designed to do, slowly, imperfectly, and publicly. But the human cost unfolded outside the courtroom, in lives forced to continue while proceedings remained unresolved. The Jolie-Pitt case stands out as a reminder that when private conflict enters public record, it no longer belongs solely to those involved. It becomes subject to interpretation, speculation, and permanence. And once that line is crossed, even silence